Greetings, humans. I'm George, and welcome back to the Windmill full of corpses. And today we have a very, very special guest, one Tasos Plataniotis from Within Progress from Thessaloniki, Greece. Thank you very much for joining me. How does it feel to be here to party with the corpses?
Hi, George. Thanks for having me. Actually, I'm surprised you pronounced my name correctly 100%.
Oh, I've been to Greece a lot of times, so I'm used to the pronunciation by now. So
impressive. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I have plenty of things to ask you, so without further ado, let's get into it. You're sitting on a new album, your debut album, titled Inner, which is coming in precisely a week from the point where we're filming this.
A week, yes, that's right. 21st of October.
21st, okay. How does it feel to have this release coming out in a week? How excited are you? How many panic attacks do you have every night?
Honestly, it's kind of liberating because we've been waiting for this moment for years. Like, these songs are very, very old. Like, some of them, even for me, I wrote some parts before even the band existed. And I'm sure the other members have their own parts of their own, like, that they wanted to release for like years. And it feels so exciting to finally be able to do this in a group, in a project. And it's getting so close. We're not sure what we're even going to do. It's like we want to get it out there as soon as we can. So even with COVID, like, we got delayed so many months, and it's long overdue, really. We're really excited.
Well, I'm excited. I've been waiting for it for a really long time, and it's been a pleasure to actually finally hear it. And I know I did get the exclusive, it's really, really cool. It makes me feel important.
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'm glad you like it.
So then let's get a bit into the songwriting. How does it work in Progress? Who does what? How do you split the tasks?
That's interesting about us, because usually we don't write our own parts for our own instruments. Like, I don't just write guitar and Vagos writes his other guitar and Paulidoros writes his drums. It's like everyone comes with an idea. Maybe it's for drums, maybe it's for the vocals, maybe it's for guitar, and then we just put it all on the table, on the same table, and we just kind of get together and build it from there. We like to have our songs have just one idea in it, like one central theme and one idea, and then we kind of build from that.
Yeah,
and each person has their own contribution to it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think I can hear that in the album. There's always like a recurring theme in every song. It's kind of good to keep you hooked, but then there's a lot that happens around it. So,
yes, exactly. That's what we try to do. We try to like change the theme a bit, in different tempo, different rhythm, time signatures and stuff like that. But it's all one theme now. And that's what we like to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it because it's kind of like an intricate album, because prog is like that most of the time, but it's not difficult to listen to because of that.
That's exactly what we're going for, actually. Yes. It's good that comes across.
So since you're one of the guitarists in the band, I wanted to zero in on the guitars for a bit. I watched your playthrough for Destructional, and what I could see there is that you have a really cool interplay of rhythm and harmony. One guitar is highly focused on rhythms and the other strongly on harmony and some leads. And that tends to happen through most of the album. So when you write guitars, when you come up with these ideas, do you think from the beginning that this is a song that's going to have two guitars, and how do we make them work together?
Not really. I mean, every song usually has two guitars, because, except when I'm playing piano, but even then there's some other guitar parts in that song. But usually we play, like, the rhythm guitar plays the rhythm fifths and stuff like that, and then the lead guitar fills in with the harmony and adds a little more, excitement to it. And that's usually how we do it. It's not like we plan it, but it just comes natural to us and easier, I think.
Yeah, it's
like in Destructional we do it a bit maybe more during the choruses. Maybe our choruses are very characteristic for that.
Yeah, I can see that. That's really cool, because it gives multiple things to notice in a song. Like, when you listen to a song for the first time, you tend to notice one aspect that kind of comes to the forefront, whether that's a catchy rhythm or a vocal melody and then you go in it multiple times, and then what you already know kind of tends to fall into the background, and you start unpacking more things.
Yeah, exactly.
That
usually
happens.
Some of the synthesizers do that as well.
Yeah.
The synthesizer takes the place of the guitar, or they melt into one sound, and you can't tell them apart anymore. That kind of thing. We like to do that.
So I also want to get a bit into some of your influences, which we've talked a bit, and I know some of them and can hear some of them, but I really wanted to get your take on what bands do you think have been most influential for or you in writing and in developing yourself musically?
For this album specifically, I think we all listen to the same bands mostly. Like if you talk about prog bands like Leprous and Vola, and Carnival, Caligula's Horse.
Okay.
Those kind of bands are always in our sound. I mean, I don't think we can escape from that. They're like the core of what we're doing. But each member has his own, like, of course, with all other bands, that's the case. But with us, it's each member has his own, like, personal preferences that he likes to put in the band. Like for me, obviously, people that know me personally know that I love Muse. Yeah. So I like to put in little musy moments inside our songs. Same with our drummer, Polidoros. He likes to do that too. Our singer, Themis, likes nothing more with that band. And he kind of tries to emulate their vocals. And also the Deftones, or bassist likes Soen. And so we all kind of put all those things together. And I think we tried something new of our own. But maybe it's too early to tell so far. But we try to do that, with those kind of influences.
Yeah, it's curious because I think with a lot of these bands, it's so hard to do something new these days. So in some sense, the best way to innovate is like to put the puzzle pieces in a different order, I guess. And that's what I see a lot of bands do. That you can't really point out something that hasn't completely been done before, but the end result has an essence of its own. And that's what I can see on this album.
It's extremely hard to do something new. Yeah, I also hear other people saying, we sound like Dream Theater, or we sound like bands I've never even heard of, myself. And it's just kind of each person's individual view of what they've heard and what they hear on our music. And I think it's kind of like subjective.
Yeah,
which is why I don't really care, much about answering those kind of questions. But, obviously we take our own influences, but those influences have influences of their own, and so other people might hear them and not our first influences.
Yeah, but that's kind of cool, and it's cool that you mentioned that it's subjective, because I guess depending on my mindset, I tend to hear a different thing. So, for example, I remember I was mentioning Tool in our reaction to Hidden Wound, and that didn't I didn't really hear Tool when listening to the album, but then when I would remind that, immediately I would focus on the bass, because I feel like the tone tends to have a bit of a similar vibe, just my perception. So that's cool.
Tool is such an influential band, and it's hard to escape playing prog and not sounding like Tool, or like Meshuggah, or those kind of huge bands. It's really hard to escape their influence. I mean, there's moments in the album that were like kind of inspired by Meshuggah, but you can't really hear it because of the music. But the rhythm is there. I mean, it's obviously there.
Okay, so while we're talking other bands, I just wanted to get into the Muse universe a little bit, since I know that's really close to you, and ask you, what do you think are some of the most musy moments on the album? I have my own, but I'm curious to see again how much we have in common.
Definitely the instrumental song, Us the Constellations, especially the end. The end is like it's a classic Muse moment, I think, with the solo and the space kind of synths and the delays going on and all that sound. I think it was actually intentional for me to copy Muse in that moment. It just seemed right. Also, the Reach for the Stars final solo was like the fuzz solo.
Okay.
In the end, if you remember that. That was another intentional Muse kind of rip-off, if you will.
Yeah.
But I like that sound. Like that fuzzy sound is one of my favorite guitar tones, actually.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, go on.
I'm not that much of an expert in tones, so I don't think I really tell it apart from the rest. But I'll go back and check it out with this new wisdom in mind. For me personally, it's been mostly the cinematic stuff, like As the Constellations, of a Ruminant, and Pathos, the stuff at the end. I felt Pathos had a bit of an exogenesis vibe, and of a Ruminant, a bit of a map of the problematic vibe. It's hard to stay away.
Actually, yeah, interesting. For Pathos, I think it was more toward Leprous, because they like to build up their songs and have those kind of continued vocal harmonies. And I think Leprous was the band we were trying to imitate in that song, and like try to find our own sound through that build-up that they do. But Map Over the Problematic actually comes across in Us the Constellations again for that piano part. That is actually very reminiscent of that new song.
Yeah, that's one of my.
Listen to it again, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I definitely will. That's one of my favorite Muse songs, so that's probably also why it immediately popped up when I heard it. Okay, I just have one more question about other bands, and then we'll just focus on you because you're the star of the show here. Moving away from like the big names and looking into your local scene, do you have any bands that you really like that really speak to you? And maybe why is Within Progress better than them?
Actually, you should look down on your shirt, because Need is a band we actually really like and enjoy watching live. We watch them live. Personally, I think the band Playgrounded, if you've heard of them, are very close to what we do, because they have this kind of like electronic vibe to them, a lot more than the other prog bands in Greece, like Mother of Millions and Poem, which is also bands we look up to. But them especially, I think, have this fresh and new vibe to them that I think is what we're trying to do as well.
Yeah,
and I feel closest to them personally, and I think the band members will agree with me.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I haven't thought about them, but now that you mention it, that really seems to be a bit more in the same niche. And I've heard a few songs of theirs. I haven't looked into them that much. And yeah, Need definitely.
You should. They're really good.
Yeah, Need is definitely one of my favorites. I can't really pick a favorite from that country, but your scene is one of my favorites as far as prog goes. And where I'm sitting right now, Poem, Need, and Mother of Millions are just about the holy trinity of Greek progressive metal. And you guys are kind of the next best thing from what I've heard so far with this album.
Thank you. I think the first song, Sky We Want, Sky We Love, is very, very Need. It has some moments in there that are very Eastern Greek, prog, like this kind of thing. Maybe like Dream Theater a little bit.
Yeah, also capturing a bit more of those like Middle Eastern sort of vibes.
Yeah, exactly. Those scales and those vibes. Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, one aspect.
I think, well, just to answer the last part of your question, I think what we do better, or maybe it's not better, it's just a different style, I don't know, is that we we implement pop hooks and melodies into like the vocals. And I think that most prog bands kind of lose that part. I mean, they try to be more technical. We don't really care about sounding more technical. If we sound good, but it's hooky and catchy and the sound is good, we don't really care about sounding too much complex. It's kind of off-putting to the audience, I think, to be too prog.
Yeah,
we like to hide it. We like to hide it.
Yeah, I like to find it. So it's okay. And one more aspect about the album that was really curious to me is that it starts with more of the like heavier songs and the ones that are more like bangers and get your head moving.
Yes.
And then it grows sort of increasingly cinematic towards the end. So was this kind of a conscious decision? And why do you think it turned out that way?
It was a conscious decision to put the bangers, as you say, the best songs in the beginning of the album and kind of leave the bigger ones or the ones that could be a little more hard to digest towards the end. Actually, it doesn't really matter in today's age which order I think you put in an album, because people will just find you through a playlist or through YouTube, and only hardcore fans will actually listen to the entire album from the beginning to the end. But I think it's best to look into that, like to look into the track order and keep those fans in mind, like give them an entire experience. And I think it was much more of a conscious decision to put those songs in the beginning and, the cinematic bigger songs in the end, because we want to put the listener through an experience. And I think the last 4 songs, like Us the Constellations and Absence of Judgment and Off Ruminant and Pathos, are a very good way to end the album, and I think the listener who appreciates entire albums will also appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely did. And it's cool because it gives a change of pace. Because maybe somebody who won't listen to an entire album likes something that's more immediately catchy, but then these sort of things are good for a change of pace if you're listening to an hour-long album. If all the things stay bangers, it loses steam after a while. So that change in pace is really refreshing towards
we
the
like
end.
dynamics. We like to put some calm moments in there and give the listen some time to rest, you know? That was a conscious decision, yes.
Yeah. And I don't know that much about the concept, but I think it works with that too. So we'll get into that a little bit later because I want to ask you about some of the songs specifically. And that's actually what I wanted to get into now. But starting off with the singles, I wanted to ask you a bit about the videos, starting with Hidden Wound. I really like the way that video was built and also kind of what meaning I was able to attach to it, let's say. But what does it mean to you, if anything specific?
That theme actually was very touching to all of us because I think we've all been through this kind of psychological trauma in some sense. And I think that song speaks personally to many people because everyone has stories and issues that they don't talk about with many of their close people. You know, they just kind of keep on themselves. And that's why even the actor who played on that video clip, you know, he actually he took this on his own terms, and he thought how he would deal with situations like this in his life, you know. And I think it speaks to many people because everyone has these kind of problems, you know. And the way we depicted them was very, I'd say, creative in many ways. So I think, yeah, that's why people that's why we put that song in as the first single.
Yeah,
it's like the most I think it was our most let's say creative way to put a story visually on the screen, you know. And we had lots of ideas for that song specifically. That's why we chose to put it as a first single.
Yeah, my favorite aspect, especially about the video, is that sort of fluorescent substance that kind of shows up at the end of the video when the lighting changes. That's kind of a really cool visual metaphor to say how basically under the right angle you get to actually see what somebody might be going through.
Yes, I think that was our best idea for that video.
Yeah, that was
the body paint.
That was super creative, and I remember the adrenaline down my spine when I watched it for the first time, and that shot sort of popped up on screen and everything changed.
Yeah, and me too. Actually, when the video creator sent us the video, I was waiting for that moment, and when it came, I was so happy that he did it that way. It was so good.
So that was super cool, and it was a great way to kick off the album. And it seems like you don't settle for one really important message because the second single had one too. So yes. I know what it's about, but maybe if you'd like to say a few words about Destructional and why you think that's important, that would be really cool.
Yes. So Destructional is about climate change and how humans affect nature around them. It's specifically though about climate change because it's a very modern issue, you know, going on right now. And it's been going on for the last like 30 years or so, maybe more. And it's an issue we like to talk about because we felt that it's important to address. And we're still a small band, but I like to think that we can influence in some sort of way people around us. And like a big inspiration for that song was Gojira, because they talk about that stuff a lot. And it's like their whole philosophy of this band is to, you know, educate and inform people through music about climate change and the environment and nature. And it was personally for me a big influence to go and do my thing and write about what I care about. And I really care about those kind of issues. And the story itself with the bird and the ocean and the oil and that kind of destruction and the fire was like a very strong image in my head when I was writing that song. And I really wanted to show that specific story. And I think it's very strong and powerful imagery.
Yeah, it was. And what I really liked about the imagery there is that you kind of see the bird suffering because of an oil spill at the beginning. And
Yes,
in some
yes.
sense, when it kind of decides to turn against humanity, for the lack of a better expression, it's kind of that same suffering that's coming back against humanity. Because you've got the bird spitting fire.
Exactly, yes. It's maybe a little over the top, some might say, but I wanted it to be over the top. You know, I wanted the humans to burn alive because it's much more strong and much more eye-catching and much more captivating. And maybe it will make you think after listening to the song. It'll even make you think about some things. And I liked how the animator actually put that our story into the screen.
Okay, so we talked about these singles. I also want to get into some of the songs that weren't singles that spoke to me the most. And the next one is Barakas Paradox. I like this one a lot because I Googled a bit what the concept is about, and you have this sort of logic problem settled where there's a donkey midway between a stack of hay and some water, equally hungry and equally thirsty, and it ends up basically dying because it can't prioritize. So I assume this song isn't about the tragic death of a donkey. So what do you think is the message that's actually being conveyed here?
It's interesting that you mentioned that you Googled it, because that's what we wanted for people to do by naming the song like that, but without mentioning anything about that in the song itself. It's about basically the generational gap between our generation and maybe our parents' generation, maybe older than them. But it's this kind of struggle between what they think is right for our lives and what we think is right for our own lives. And it kind of tackles issues like laziness and lack of motivation. So basically, we ourselves are the donkey who has lots of different options, maybe much more than our parents did in our age. And we just don't do much about it. We expect other people to fix things for us without taking much action. And I think that's kind of an issue that's very much depicted, and I think it's done on our generation instead of our parents. I think they took much more action than we did, and they had much more hardships than we have right now. And yet we can't be happy somehow, you know?
Yeah, well, it really depends how you look at it. On the other hand, in some sense, overcoming hardship is one of the greatest motivators. So if the hardship isn't there, it's really a difficult issue to tackle, because if you have everything you need, you have everything you need. And
exactly.
Yeah.
It's good to have, problems in a sense, because they make you go out, and deal with life and deal with issues and, get through college and get your own job and stuff like that, that if we find ready for ourselves, then we don't learn and we just kind of sit around, and we're just kind of inert. We don't do anything. And I think that's the main theme of this song, because I don't know if it came across, but there's two people actually speaking in the same song. Like the older generation speaks in the verses, and then we ourselves speak in the choruses. And at the end, there's many voices together. And that's kind of we try to depict an argument, a verbal argument with the older generation and the younger generation. And they kind of mesh together. And that's why the end has so many vocal layers speaking different lyrics. And if you notice that again, if you listen to the song again, it maybe hits you a bit differently.
That's so cool. I did notice that moment. That's one of my favorite moments on the album. And it stood out, but I guess it makes sense in the concept, because it's there can be harmony found in a conflict dealt right, let's say. And I think that's what it is there. It's like clashing ideas that don't necessarily fit together on top of each other, because there's a polyrhythmic aspect going on there that can also really well match this idea. That's so cool. I did think about this song from the perspective of being unable to choose and being unable to get yourself to act, but I didn't think about the generational gap aspect of this sort of expanding the topic to multiple people. So that's a really cool
Yes.
perspective to add to the picture.
It could be about a choice, and choice itself. It could be about anyone choosing anything. We are surrounded by choices all the time and decision making, and maybe that decision will affect your life in a worse or better way, but you don't know. So you decide not to take it. So that's even worse if you decide not to do a decision, to make a decision, instead of picking the wrong one.
Yeah, that's and that really struck personally, because I struggle with this a lot, from big things to things that are as trivial as what should I do first for college. And I think it's because in some sense you can only do a thing at a time. And when you choose to do one thing, you sacrifice everything else that you could be doing with that time. And if you're focused on that, you'll always be spotting sort of what's left out rather than what you're actually gaining.
But you can't do everything, can you?
Yeah,
so you have to pick something someday,
Yeah.
You can't do everything at once.
Yeah, that's my struggle. That's how I related with it. So you are a guitarist, but you're also a piano player. And now that we've talked about the songs for a bit and some topics, I also want to talk a bit about the album from a piano perspective. How much of this album is written on guitar and how much on piano from your personal input?
I think it was much more written on guitar, but some parts that got written later, maybe because I didn't have this idea of Within Progress being a piano band. I never thought of it that way from the beginning. But much later, when we released the EP, I thought, why not put piano in the band, So, and like as a main instrument. So the songs that I wanted to have piano in them kind of just popped up, they just kind of spoke like, this needs piano in it. So I went on piano and wrote some parts. But even then, I think much more of the album was actually written on guitar instead of piano. I think you can hear that because there's lots of riffs in them, in the songs, and not much melody. Well, not melody, but there's not many piano moments. Like, I think out of the 12 songs, only like 4 or 5 of them have piano. And those 4 or 5 songs were written on piano and the rest are written on guitar. But I think I'd like to have more piano in our band, because I think it would kind of make us more special in a way.
Yeah, I really like those songs too, and I can definitely subscribe to that. It's like you mentioned earlier, it has this spacey vibe, and that's one of my favorite things in any kind of music. This sort of cinematic that kind of takes you away somewhere. I really
especially
like
the
those
song.
songs.
The song "Absence of Judgment" actually was written entirely on piano, and guitar came much later because we wanted to have like a heavy ending, so there's got to be guitar in it. But the whole song was written on the piano. Yeah,
I really like that one too. One other aspect that I felt about these more cinematic songs is that they kind of would work pretty good as like a soundtrack to a deep sea adventure exploration thing. And I know it's kind of a weird perspective, but it spoke to me like that. And it, as a consequence, it reminded me of, I don't know if you know the album Aquarius by Haken. I definitely heard a bit of that album on Absence of Judgment and on Sunlight Whispers.
I don't think we've heard that album, any of us.
Yeah.
Maybe some singles off it, but we're not really into Haken much. But it's interesting you mentioned it, because like soundtrack music is a small influence on me personally. I mean, I watch a movie and then I immediately go back and listen to the soundtrack if I like it and revisit that. And maybe that has taken a bit of a toll on my writing personally.
Yeah. I guess so. I really thought of it more as a soundtrack sort of thing towards the end. So it's cool to notice this difference in perspective. But while we're at piano,
which song would you say?
As the Constellations of a Ruminant Absence of Judgment.
So the last 3 songs except Tasos.
Something like that, yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
Okay, so I do have one. If we move away from Within Progress for a while, I do have another aspect to ask you about, which is your YouTube channel. I've noticed that you do a lot of covers, a lot of them on piano, and especially lately, a lot of piano covers of songs that do not have piano. So what are you aiming to do with this channel, other than, I guess, break the laws of metal?
This channel started many years ago, and it was kind of my, getaway to play the songs that I like and just do it for me, And in the last few months, I've been exploring trying to convert a metal song into piano because it seems very creative for me. It's you can see a lot of guitar covers of prog bands and metal bands, but you rarely see a piano cover because there may be a lot fewer channels that do that, and maybe with more modern acts like Gojira and Deftones and those kind of bands, not many people play them on the piano, and that's kind of my own pleasure to do, and convert a metal song and see how that would sound on the piano, and see how I would do that part and the singer, and maybe that part the singer screaming. So how would I do that on the piano? What do the guitars do? What does the bass do? And it's very creative for me to do that, and it's kind of a good outlet for me.
Yeah, and the end result is really cool because it's like you can do so much on piano because you have two hands and you can do multiple melodies at the same time. So you can take something that's guitar and something that's vocals and put them together like that. So it kind of takes a song that would feel like pieces and makes it into a single theme. Yeah, and
maybe it's like a complete other song in the end. If it's like a death metal band like Gojira, and you play them on the piano, maybe it comes out like a completely different thing.
Yeah, it did. And I really love the Gojira stuff. It was like, I'm not sure of this, but you might be the first person in the observable universe to play the breakdown from Flying Whales on a piano. that was really
there's
cool.
Actually, thanks. I think there was another person who did, but it sounded very robotic, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to just take the guitar and just push it on the piano and hey, that's it. I wanted to make it sound like a piano song. But Gojira, and maybe I could try another band like them, like they play death metal, and maybe more anything far away from piano as possible is very creative for me, and I think I could do that and have fun with it.
Yeah, that was really cool. I think from the ones I've seen, Flying Whales may have been my favorite one so far. So
cool.
Okay, one really cool thing that I've seen on that channel that I still want to ask you about, and that I think also roots back to your songwriting in general, is that you've basically made an entire song out of the Skype theme. So how did that end up happening?
It was a call like this one that I happened to be near a piano to give a piano lesson, and they called me, and when they were calling me, I just tried playing that, for a few seconds, and I thought to myself, hey, that sounds cool. So I just build on that and and I thought, what would I do? What would that sound like if I made it into a full song? And I just kept doing and building and putting ideas into it, and there it is. It's just a bit of fun. It's nothing like doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of like, hey, there's a song of the Skype ringtone if you needed it. There it is.
Yeah, well, it was really cool. I really liked it when I heard it, and I think what that shows is that you can make an entire thing by just sort of experimenting. So what I wanted to lead into is this kind of how within progress songs tend to develop, given that you've said you kind of start at a theme and build around it? Because it seems that there's an experimental aspect somewhere at the root of the songwriting. Yeah, very much so. I mean, once we find the theme, like it's this riff plus this riff, and this harmony and these kind of chord progressions, and then it's much easier to define the song through that. Once you find that theme, it's much easier to like change it a bit and twist it around and consort it and stuff like that, and it becomes its own song and its own like little tiny universe, if you will. Like each song has its own world, I think. Yeah, that's really cool. But in some sense, there's a risk there, because I guess a good theme can make a song, but a bad theme can break an entire song. So have you ever been worried about that?
Not really. I think if we like the theme, and obviously if we do, we're going to put it on an album. Some people at least will like it as well. You know, there are songs that we just threw out because they were no good, or they weren't pushing us to keep going. You know, and songs that don't push you and they don't like make you get up from and go back from college and university and come back to your laptop and write. They're no good. They're not worth it. You know. So there's lots of songs that are just staying at the back, you know, at the ideas folder, and no one's touching them because they're just not good.
Oh, okay. So there's a little bit of selection going on.
A lot more. Like there's 12 songs for you to hear, but there's probably like, I don't know, 50 or 60 tiny ideas that never got finished.
You know, Periphery is one of my favorite bands, and when they released their first album, they did a similar thing, and now they end up kind of releasing like these bulb albums where they just rehash ideas that they had stacked into the folder. Do you maybe see that happening in the future, sort of playing with old stuff? This maybe, just kind of came to me.
Yeah, maybe we will. Actually, we are already writing and messing around with some ideas we have, but it's about, if you stay organized and keep them in the folder and you know where they are, where that idea is, maybe after a few years, you can come back to it with a new mindset and maybe build a song out of it that you couldn't a few years before because you didn't have the right tools, maybe.
Yeah.
So definitely, we never throw anything out. We keep it there, and if we decide to go back to it and it's good, it's good.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Hopefully you won't have to buy a lot of extra hard drives, but the idea in itself is really good. So I do want to close just with some silly stuff because that's what we do at the Windmill. And this interview's been all philosophic and stuff. So I did want to ask you, because there was a very important aspect that I noticed of the video for Destructional. What is your favorite item of clothing, and why is it socks with stripes?
I'm actually famous for my socks. Everyone here talks about my socks because, you know, when I sit and they see it, they're like, "Oh, Tasos is wearing a pink to black today," you know?
Wow. We need that on a future playthrough. We need to see that.
Yes, I will definitely. I think I'm like the most maybe serious and down to earth and not joking kind of guy in the band, but I do like to show a little whimsy sometimes. So I think that outlet is my socks, you know?
Oh, that's a really
it's
cool
like
idea.
If you notice that and you have a way in to talk with me, but out on the outside, I'm a bit more shy and not really extroverted, if you will. So if you notice that and you start talking to me about that, maybe maybe we can be friends.
I like that. I personally really love socks, and I look forward to the day when a band does merchandise based on socks. So it's really cool to hear the idea that socks might connect people sometime in the future.
That's actually a good idea. Maybe we could do a striped socks theme one day.
Okay, now to get into another aspect that is really, how do I put this? It's a really important aspect to me, is that I've been to Greece a number of times, and Greek food is the best. So I just noticed that the tones on your album for the guitars and bass are really, really tasty. So if they were a Greek dish, what would they be?
Oh man. Let's say. Maybe moussaka.
Really?
Have you had moussaka?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
I did.
It's like lots of cream on the top and little mince, and when you get to the bottom, it's just so good. Maybe I think that would be a very appropriate food for a guitar tone.
Yeah, it's pasticcio. I think is kind of a different thing, but sort of in that same.
It's different. Yes. They're very similar. Very similar.
Yeah, that also works because it's kind of like crusty on the top, but all softy at the bottom.
Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you for taking the time.
Me too.
I hope
I actually loved your questions. Very, Very, very innovative questions here.
Oh, thanks.
Especially the last ones.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I just really wanted to ask you stuff that I was curious about, whether that's important or just silly. So thanks. And thank you for taking the time. It was an absolute pleasure, and best of luck with the release. October 21st. Oh, it's it's independently released too, right?
Yes, self-released, yes.
That's super impressive for the quality of this album. So congratulations on the release.
Thank you very much.